Hey guys, Moose here. I wanted to leave this at one video, and I kind of am, and you'll understand what I mean in a minute, or you already know based on the name of the video here, but this has to do with the changes that YouTube has made to monetization, and specifically within that, a lot of the conversations have been going on around it. I'm going to single out one person. I'm going to talk about a little bit later why, and some of the details around that, because it's not really one person's fault. I don't blame this individual for making the mistake they made. I don't think they did it deliberately, and I'll get in all that later. That's not really the point right now. But what I'm looking to talk about here, and what I want to try to educate people about a little bit, and I want to be clear, I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm coming at this as someone who does a little bit of data analysis for a living. It's not my primary role. I understand it well enough to do my job, and I understand it well enough to know when someone is lying to me or misleading me. And that's what this is about. This is about misinformation and where it comes from, how it impacts us, and how it can get involved in a conversation where no one is acting maliciously, which is the key part. And when maybe someone is acting maliciously, and we're kind of going to look at two examples of that here. Misinformation is a huge deal right now, and if you don't understand why, you probably aren't reading the news at all. It played a big role in, and this isn't a partisan issue, but it played a big role in the recent elections in the US. And you can disagree about how it pushed things or where it went, but if it wasn't significant, Facebook would not be getting raked over the coals right now about how they handle false news stories. And I'm choosing my words carefully there because the other way of saying that has some different connotations, which I'm not looking to get into here. This is not a partisan issue. False information is a big deal. It's becoming a bigger deal as access to information becomes easier and easier. And we're finding out that we're manipulatable. Or manipulable. I'm actually not sure which word that is. I think it's a second based on something I saw in autocorrect earlier today. Anyway, it's an important issue. If a company as big as Facebook is getting all kinds of flack from all over the place about this issue, you should understand how important this is and why it matters. You can manipulate a lot of people with misinformation. And some of it is a lot more insidious and small than you might think, and some of it is spread by people with good intentions. And like I said, that's something we're going to look at here. So, hopefully with that, you understand the seriousness of misinformation. You understand the impact it has on society these days because you have such ready access to information. So let's go through an example. And this is about the monetization changes. I'm not going to touch on the details of that, whether or not I think it's good or bad. I already made a video about that. Everyone's expressed opinions. I don't want to talk about that because that's what everyone's talking about. I want to talk about what I see as a lie and something that people are not latching onto and identifying as a problem. And this is something that people do in business. They do that with their coworkers. They do this when they're putting out a press release, as we're going to see here. They do this when they're making an argument online or anywhere else. You can misrepresent data incredibly easily, and that's what we're getting into here. So, not going to worry about most of this. Doesn't matter. The important thing is down here below. Start off with what they're actually doing. 4,000 hours of watch time in the past 12 months, 1,000 subscribers. If you're watching this, you understand this issue, you probably already know exactly what that means. I'm not going to worry about it. Here's the problem, and here's where we get into trouble. Down below, they make this statement. Though these changes will affect, sorry about the highlighting, a significant number of channels, 99% of those affected were making less than $100 per year in the last year, with 90% earning less than $250 in the last month. Okay. That is, right now the best I can say is that those are numbers. What those numbers mean, we're going to revisit in a second. So, let's look at what those numbers should mean and what they're suggesting that they mean. If we look at what they're trying to accomplish by doing this, they state it fairly clearly. Right up here. As Susan mentioned in December, we're making changes to address the issues that affected our community in 2017 so we can prevent bad actors from harming the inspiring and original creators around the world who make their living on YouTube. Okay. We can go into specifics here. They specifically talk about spammers, impersonators, and other bad actors. Okay. One big thing to note here, and the most important thing that is going to show why the number that they put forward is likely misinformation and misleading at best. I would like to call it a lie, but YouTube could very easily say this is a factually correct statement, but it is framed in a way that is deliberately misleading in my mind. Spammers and impersonators and other bad actors, those are only a factor if they're active. If someone had a channel that they were spamming with in 2012, do we benefit the community by taking away monetization from that when its last activity was in 2012 or 2015 or even 2016? Does that benefit anything? Does that help make the community better? No, of course it doesn't. They're not doing anything now. That was a problem that's long gone. Those channels don't matter anymore. So here's the problem. YouTube partnerships are notoriously easy to get up until now. They added the 10,000 views. That's relatively recent. Here's the problem. Those affected, that's what they're indicating when they're saying who this statistic takes into account. 99%. 99% of what? 99% of those affected. The reasonable interpretation of that language is that they're talking about any partnered channel that will no longer be partnered as a result of this change, because they lack 4,000 view hours in the last 12 months and or they lack 1,000 subs. Because you need both. And that's an important detail we're going to get to in the next example. You need both to be partnered at this point. Otherwise, they're taking it away. So, here's the problem with that. Based on what they've said, the language they've used, and the understanding that one could reasonably take away from this, they're factoring in a ton of channels that aren't active. That aren't meaningfully active, or aren't at all active. It's just anyone that was previously partnered. That's a big problem. Because is that 99% if you only look at who's active, which is what you could reasonably expect to be potentially impacting the improvements that they're looking to gain by making this change? Because I sincerely doubt it'd be 99% at that point. I'm nobody. I don't get that many views. I'm making almost $200 a year. So they're going to say 99. I'm in the 1%. Not only that, I'm double the bar for that. I've got to be in like the 0.5%, which is ridiculous. I'm not that good. My content's not that good. I don't get that many views, and I'm making $200, and you're going to tell me I'm in the top 1 or 0.5%? That's questionable. And when you look at the language they used, this, if someone presented this in a meeting that I was in, I would call bullshit immediately. Because that is loaded language. It's incredibly vague. It doesn't tell you what they're actually factoring into account. And it leaves them an opportunity to mislead you. So that statistic is red flag right there. That's misleading. And I don't think that that statistic means what they are implying it means when they write this. And that's a problem. And we're all talking about how good or bad this is. And that's fine. There's a lot to talk about there. But no one seems to be looking at this and saying, hey, you're trying to bullshit me. And that's what they're doing here. I genuinely believe this is the malicious example of misinformation that is being put forth. I think this is a deliberately, not manipulated, but they have a way to very easily make it look like what they're doing doesn't really affect anyone. Which I'm pretty confident is BS to a serious degree. There's no way it's 99% if you don't take into account a bunch of inactive channels that make no difference to anything that they're talking about here. That's the first problem. I think I've adequately explained why that's BS. So let's move on to the second example. So this is Total Biscuit. You probably already know who Total Biscuit is. Most people do, I think, in this community. So I'm not going to get into that. But in case you don't know him, some pertinent facts. What he's done here, I'm going to suggest is misleading. I don't think that's his intention. I think 99% of the time he's on our side here. And he is trying to be genuinely honest and correct, and I think he puts a tremendous effort into being accurate and fair. He's... The reputation that I understand he has is that. So when I talk about him making a mistake here and putting up something that's misleading, I'm not doing it because I think he's the problem. I'm not doing it because I think he needs to be dealt with or something. That's not what this is. He made a mistake just like anyone does. And we need to talk about it, not because we need to call him out, but because we need to address this kind of a mistake so that it doesn't turn into a whole bunch of other people making a mistake. That's why we're talking about this. We're not talking about this because he's a problem. He didn't do this maliciously. There's nothing about that here. That's not what this is about. So with that out of the way, let's look at what he's basically said. So bottom line is what he said is he looked at someone who has 1,000 subs and 4,000 hours of views and tried to estimate their monetization, how much they'd get. And he came out with, I think, $24 over a year. Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to question his math. I haven't gone through it. I'm going to assume that he did it correctly. He probably knows more about this than I... No, he definitely knows more about this than I do, and that's fine. That's not the issue. The issue is that if you are, let's say, and this is where I could get in a little bit of trouble because I am looking at this from my perspective. I'm looking at this as someone who puts up 20-minute Let's Plays, and this doesn't make any sense. And you could be, I've seen a lot of talk about animators and artists who put up much shorter videos, as a result get much less view time per video, and that's a valid point. But I'm just going to talk about this from the perspective of what I think he's talking about, because this is what he is. Someone who might put out produced content and or Let's Plays. I don't know if he ever did Let's Plays. I'm assuming he at one point put out Let's Plays. Let's just say 20-minute videos. If you're making videos in the way that I am and in the way that most Let's Players are, and you have almost 1,000 subs and you're active, there is no way that you only have 4,000 hours of views. There is zero chance. Absolutely none. I have almost 5 times that. And I'm nobody. I talked about this earlier. I'm nothing. I don't get that many views. I don't have that many anything. Every number that you can measure my channel by is small. And I'm fine with that. It is what I've earned. I'm not complaining about that. But if I'm getting 18,000 hours of views in 2017... if you're active, there's no way that you're even remotely close to 4K. So the 4K is a meaningless requirement in my mind. That doesn't mean a damn thing. The 1,000 subs is where you're actually going to get caught up. That's what's going to stop people from being partners in this environment. If you're talking about shorter videos, that's a whole different animal. I don't really have any experience there. I can't speak to that. But my understanding is this is not so much talking about that. He specifically referenced the 10-minute long video. So... and he said, on average, let's say people watch half your video, which would be 5 minutes. My average view time is about 7.5 minutes. So the problem here is then that I have higher average view time. I put out about... Let me start that over. I have higher view time than he's expecting. And if he's saying that with less view time, which means more views, you would get only... So, okay, sorry, let me rephrase that. Let's compare 4,000 hours of my views to 4,000 hours of the views that he's explaining here. His are 5 minutes per view, which means that there are more individual views in his example than in my reality, because my average view time's higher. So one viewer is accounting for more of that 4,000. I'm getting 200 with 5 times as many hours watched. 24 times 5 is not 200. It's significantly less than that. It's a little more than half that. So the math is a little off. I think he's being a little bit conservative. But the overall point, and the reason this is misleading, is no one who is active at nearly 1,000 subs is only getting 4,000 hours of view time. You're not. You're just not. Not with 10-minute videos, not with 20-minute videos. You aren't. That's not a thing that's happening. So to suggest that no one's missing out on anything because it's $24 a year, based on this math that doesn't line up to reality at all, that's a problem. And this is why it's misleading, and this is why I have a problem with it. Because no one is hitting those two that you're not hitting 4K and 100 subs in the same day, or even the same month. Those aren't even remotely at the same point in growth in a channel. So using those two metrics to calculate something that somehow invalidates a ton of arguments about how much this impacts people is BS. It's not a realistic perspective of what is actually going on. So that is where I take an issue with what he's saying. I don't think he's doing that deliberately. I don't think that's a deliberate misrepresentation or something that's deliberately misleading. Like I said, this is a mistake. The problem is someone in his position who has all the followers that he has puts this out there, says something like this, and I can make a comment. I'm nobody. I have like 20 followers. I can make a comment and say this analysis is flawed because you're not hitting those 2 points at the same time. I can try to do that in 140 characters or 280, whatever Twitter allows these days. I got 1 like. No one gave a shit. No one cares because I don't have the megaphone that he has. And the problem is if no one says anything about someone saying something like this, then we just take it. We just take it and say this is it. That's what we've done. This is the reality that we're presenting. No, there's no counterpoint. There's no, oh, hey, I made a mistake. And that's not a criticism of TB at all. It's not him. Like, he's on our side. That's the problem. And that's why this is such a serious issue, because how do you correct this without someone of equal stature calling him out and saying, well, actually, you're wrong about that, and that doesn't exist. So a guy with purely positive intentions, trying to be a good public figure, doing the right thing, can put something like this out, unintentionally mislead people, and there's no correcting it. And that's where the issue comes in. And it has nothing to do with TB being a bad guy. With the YouTube thing, I think, yeah, that's deliberately misleading. And for business reasons, for financial reasons. They get people to be okay with this, then they get less backlash and they pay less of a price for implementing this change. And you can get into whether it's good or bad. I'm not talking about that. I'm explaining why they made that, why they put that in there. And didn't put it in there for no reason. There was thought put into why that was there. And it reflects either maliciousness or stupidity on the part of YouTube. And in TB's case, I think he's so far removed from being of this size that he doesn't necessarily understand where this is coming from, I guess. It's hard to say why he didn't identify this issue, but I can guarantee you it wasn't malicious. At any rate, there's no way that this is a reasonable representation of reality. It's just not. There's nothing else to say about that. I can show that with my own numbers. I've seen plenty of people on the Let's Play subreddit who could also show that. I've seen plenty of people on Twitter who could also show that. In some cases, yeah, maybe you would if you have incredibly short videos. But that's not the norm, I don't think. And I think people who were in that camp already had a lot of trouble on YouTube anyway. So, I don't know. I'm speaking about this from the perspective of someone who is in this, who is being impacted by this, and I can look at my numbers and see this doesn't add up at all. Not even remotely close. So, I have to say something about it. Misinformation, like I said, is a tremendous issue right now. And if no one says anything and they just take it at face value, then we have this problem where everyone's misinformed. This has 28 retweets and 215 likes. How many of those people understand that this is not a representation of what's actually happening? 1? I didn't like it, so I'm not in there. 2, maybe? Optimistically? That's the real 99% statistic. 99% of people don't understand that this is misinformation. And that's the problem. So, anyway. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this. This issue's not going to go away. We can talk about it with this, and that's fine. But this is going to come up every time anything happens. Because it's so easy to take numbers and make something that looks real and make something that looks convincing and mislead people, because data literacy is non-existent. It is a serious problem. And you can see its impact in many other aspects of life. So just don't think you're smart. Don't think you can turn off your brain because it looks right. Pay attention, question things. The second you stop questioning things is the second you become someone who can be manipulated by this kind of comment. And again, completely without any kind of maliciousness whatsoever. Honest mistake. But if it's not corrected, it's no different than if it was malicious. And that's the problem. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Take care.